comfort in that. So Angelo and Mariana have got married off stage and they come back in. And the Duke says, well, okay, Mariana, I'm going to kill Angelo. So he says, the very mercy of the law cries out, most audible, even from his proper tongue, and Angelo for Claudio, death for death. Haste still pays haste, and leisure answers leisure. Like doth quit like, and measure still for measure. So Angelo has to die under the law, and also because one measure deserves an equal measure. So we know that he doesn't end up killing Angelo because Claudio isn't dead, so the concept of measure for measure maintains pure, even though at this point he's saying it's death for a death. The reality is that it's life for a life. So he goes to send Angelo off to get killed, and Mariana intervenes and says, no, don't let me have just got married and then have my husband die. And the Duke Vincentio says, oh, well, I only made you go and get married because otherwise the fact that, you know, people knew that you'd slept together might ruin your reputation. Plus, now you can have all his money, so you're rich, you're a rich widow, and you can buy a better husband than him once he's dead. And Mariana says, no, I'm still in love with him. And she kneels to try and beg the Duke to let him go. But the Duke just goes to change the topic. He's done. He's finished. No, Angelo's going to die. However, Mariana isn't ready to let it go like that. She just says, no, we can't let it go. And she says, Isabella, come on, get over here and help me persuade him that Angelo needs to live. And the Duke is quite interested by that because he says, well, it's because of Angelo that her brother died, so she can't plead for Angelo's life. That would bring her brother's ghost back to drag her to death. And Mariana says, no, please, Isabel, please just kneel by me. And she says, the best men are moulded out of faults, and for the most become much more the better for being a little bad. So she's saying Angelo will grow from this experience. He'll become better as a result of his flaws. So perhaps this reads into Shakespeare's point about why it's important to think about yourself and to have some self-knowledge. And then Isabella does end up kneeling and begging the Duke not to kill Angelo. And she says, look, a due sincerity governed his deeds until he looked on me, so it is partly my fault. She recognises that back in Act 2, when she came in and begged Angelo for her life, she recognises that perhaps the way that she did that meant something as a woman rather than just as a nun. And then she says, you know what, my brother had justice. He did the thing for which he died. So he was guilty of adultery and he was killed for adultery. And then she says, but Angelo intended to commit adultery, but however, he actually didn't. So she says, you know, you can't judge someone for a thought or for an intent. You have to judge them for their act. And so the Duke says, hang on, I've just thought of another problem. Why was Claudio killed early? He should have been killed at 8, he was killed at 4. What happened? And the Provost says, because I was told to. And the Duke says, well, you're fired. Well, the Provost doesn't react to that, so it's obviously been agreed between them beforehand how this conversation will go. And so he says that, well, if it makes you feel any better, Barnardine is still alive. And so the Provost goes to get the prisoners that he's allowed to live. And Aeschylus takes this opportunity to say to Angelo, how can one who appears to be so learned and so wise slip so grossly in the heat of blood and in the lack of tempered judgment afterward? So this acts as sort of a warning. Anyone can fall. It doesn't matter how learned or wise you are, you can still give in to temptation. It comes back to that idea of false appearances, that someone who appears good can turn out to be gross. And it identifies the two different flaws that have let Angelo down, reacting in the heat of blood and also the poor use of measured decision-making. And Angelo says, yes, I'm ready to die. So the Provost comes back in with Juliet, Barnardine and Claudio. The Duke says to Barnardine that he will let him live. He's removed the death sentence. but he makes Friar Peter take over his instructions so that Barnardine might grow out of the experience and become a better person. The Provost reveals Claudio, and the Duke says to Isabella, well, he's pardoned, and marry me. And then he says, Claudio is my brother too, but we'll talk about this later. Oh, look, Lord Angelo has figured out that he's safe. If I'm killing Angelo for killing Claudio, but Claudio's alive, then that means that I can't kill Angelo either. Well, Angelo, your evil quits you well. You have committed evil, but you've gotten away with it. Look that you love your wife. Her worth is worth yours. I find an apt remission in myself, and yet here's one in place I cannot pardon. So he's just let them all off the hook. He's pardoned everybody. And then he looks at Lucio and he says, I can't let this go. I can't let you go. And he says, how dare you commit such slander against me as a duke? And Lucio says, oh yeah, look, you can hang me for it, but I'd much rather be whipped. And the Duke says, you'll be whipped and then you'll be hung. And since you told me that you got a woman pregnant, you're going to have to marry her and then you'll be whipped and hanged. And Lucio's response to that is not don't whip me or don't hang me. His response is do not marry me to a whore. And the Duke says, you know what? Don't worry about the other punishments. You can just get married. You don't have to be executed. And Lucio reacts to that by saying marrying a punk or a prostitute is pressing to death, whipping and hanging. So he considers his punishment of being forced to marry the woman that he impregnated as a fate worse than death, much worse than death. And the Duke says slandering a prince deserves it. So he's let him off the death penalty simply because he thinks it's a worse punishment to make Lucio marry a prostitute. Then we just have the final monologue from the Duke where he just goes through all of the characters and outlines what's going to happen for them. So he says, Claudio, make sure that you marry Juliet properly this time. Mariana, I hope you're happy. Angelo, you need to love her because she's a very good woman. Aeschylus, you've been a good ruler and I'm going to give you rewards for that. Provost, I'm going to promote you because you have been a very good provost. Angelo, please forgive the provost because the head of Ragozine instead of the head of Claudio was a good move, not a bad move. Isabel, I want to talk to you about getting married and I hope that you will incline a willing ear, be willing to listen to the proposition so that we can get married. And let's go to the palace and talk about everything that's been going on in my absence. And that's the end of the play.